Now, before I introduce the transport panel, time for just a wee editorial. Paul touched then on transport, and he's not the Minister for Transport, so I spared him proper transport questions. But I have another role as well in Campbelltown. I have the great pleasure of chairing the Campbelltown Health and Education Precinct called CHEP. There's a similar project in Liverpool. There's a similar one in Westmead. There's probably one coming in Bankstown as we grow. But as proud as I am of the money that's gone into about to be the new Walker Ingham Research Institute due to open. We've got a Stage 2 Campbelltown Hospital. We've got TAFE looking what they can do on the hill. We've got UNSW and WSU educating people. We've had Landcom develop great stuff around. We've got the new Genesis Care Centre right across the road. If you haven't seen that, wow, what an addition. That's all lovely. But if you're a parent of a young child in Camden or Wallandilly or Southern Highlands and your kid has croup and is choking, don't let them do it in peak hour because you won't access you'll have real danger accessing the emergency facilities because you can't get across Narellan Road. We have, sadly, and I don't know if it was state or federal, Labor or Liberal, I don't care, but frankly, we went short on the Spring Farm Parkway. We only built it one way. Dumb decision. That has to change. I promised the Premier that I do understand the pressure on him with metros, and we definitely want a metro extension all the way to Campbelltown from the airport, but I recognise that's going to take a long time and we're going to have to spread it out with funding. I also want the feds to give us the high-speed rail that does stop at Campbelltown, does stop at Wollongong and goes straight into Western Sydney, not just into Central. I'd love to have the rapid buses we were promised and never got. But what I recognise that we could do more quickly, the Leppington link is really important. It's almost done. Even in infrastructure terms, it's pretty small. And maybe a Y-link at Glenfield so the people of Campbelltown and beyond don't need to change. But most importantly, it's probably going to be roads in the short term because simply the sheer cost, the long-term planning, we're going to have to invest in roads. We have to be able to get across the Hume Motorway. Macarthur's got to be able to deal with Macarthur. We have to be able to get on the freeway as well as off the freeway. We can't just go cheap as we did with Spring Farm Parkway and not do the whole project, the next stages. We have to electrify the train up from Wollongong. We've got to have a sort of link. So I'm hoping, as we go into our transport panel, that we're all focused on that. We have a state election in 2 years. We've got a federal election in 2 and a bit years. It is the time for the South and the Southwest to finally exert the muscle they have. I know people listening, there is at least 2 federal marginal, what will be possibly marginal federal seats, possibly with retiring MPs. There is a great swathe of seats around here from Wollongong right through, and I'm not for insurrection. All I'm saying is we all have to. Politics responds to the ballot box. This region, I'm delighted to see all the councils here together. There has to be a consolidated, not only Macarthur and the Gong combination to no longer have that one star in the 4 points of Sydney underrepresented. It is the time for the Great South, and the Southwestern will be part of that. We're absolutely proudly be part of that. But it's going to have to manifest in transport, longer-term rail, short-term road, if we're not going to condemn the people of the growing suburbs of this region to the same isolation my rallies had in Western Sydney in the 70s when the last merge and Gough came and everything. Houses of greystanes built with sand in the toilet inside and a portaloo out the back because neither septic nor sewage arrived. That's not okay. We want to see the growth of this area. We want to support the government's view that Southwest Sydney should take more than its fair share of housing responsibility, but same too should the same communities have schools and hospitals and roads and jobs to access and shade and recreational water and all the things that the Gooddoyans of the North and the East enjoy and the West is starting to enjoy. So I think with all of us need to recommit ourselves to that. We need to congratulate and thank the governments who are listening. I know the Minns government is fully focused on Southwest Sydney. They get it, they hear it, and they're responding. I know Albo, absolutely, at a federal level, is focusing on that. I know I've heard Mark Speakman say the right stuff, and I'm sure Angus Taylor and the coalition will similarly respond. If they're listening, we have to keep talking. So it's everybody in the room. It's not just your lobby groups, it's everybody. It's help your councils, help your local members, support them, put up ideas, don't just have a whinge. Take a solution, not a problem to government every time. And the solutions are, we can help house Sydney. We can solve your growth problem, but you have to help us. And that's a role for business and community and government all working together. This is the great social experiment Gough spoke about in the 70s, just not enough's happened between then and now. It is our time to shine. If we let this pass, it'll pass forever. So I thank everybody for their support, everybody who's leaning in, and let's focus on some transport. Now, I haven't set them up, but here is now the transport panel, so we can talk about some of these issues. They are all marvellous professionals working very hard, and I know privately support everything I said, just how we help them get the funding to do everything in the right time. Adam, the Fairfield's second best footballer, is going to come and talk to them afterwards. But I want you to welcome on stage Monica Gibson, the two I see at Department of Planning, Sayed Hirsh, the Head of Strategy and Infrastructure in New South Wales, Angela Jeffery, the Head of Project Delivery at Sydney Metro, and a graduate of the Dialogues Collaborative Leadership Program, her greatest boast, I tell her, and Trudi Mayers, DepSec with the most from Transport. Please welcome the Transport and Planning Super Panel, moderated by the great Adam Leto, as we welcome the member for Campbelltown in the room, the great Greg Warren. Rabbits Warren's with us as well. Please make them welcome.
Super panel, wow. High expectations. Thank you all. Trudi, we'll start with you. I think it was a year ago, roughly this time last year, where you were on stage with Kirsten and Tom talking about this new integrated, coordinated approach within government to help address some of these development issues. And we also talked about your background, which I won't go into today, but let's say you spent a fair bit of time here growing up in Campbelltown, the Cathode in particular. Talk us through 1 year on. What have you found? There was a lot of goodwill, a lot of positive messaging to come out of last year's event. How have things evolved, and what have you found in terms of the dynamic and actually getting things done?
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and thanks for having me. And thanks, Chris, for the setup on all of the transport projects. I actually think what I have seen, not just between the state government, but with councils and the federal government, is greater transparency. And that's probably the biggest change since I was here 12 months ago. Not that we were hiding things before, but in terms of sharing information, the UDP process is really good. We all get to input and put the requirements for each of the areas in. We're working closely with Syed and team on infrastructure plans and how to prioritise. Like, there is not enough money or people in the world to do what we need to do everywhere. So being able to prioritise and be transparent with all levels of government is probably the biggest change that I've seen. Another good example is, I know I talked about the Outer Southwest plan that we'd been working on with Campbelltown, Wallandilly and Camden in the last session. We haven't quite got to release yet. There's a few plans coming this year. But what that did was allow us to put on the table all of the things we were working on, whether they were early development, in planning or in delivery, and some of it was a surprise to our council partners, some of it wasn't, but we're sharing the same with the feds and kind of talking about what's the collective story we need for a region and how do we be transparent about what we're prioritising. One last comment I would make is that it's been really helpful to see the priority documents that have come out of the different councils and within government, because that helps us understand, and they're not a laundry list. Like, these aren't 500 things that everyone's asking for. They're actually the key things that matter, and a lot of effort's been put in to come up with what those priorities are, either collectively or for individual areas, and that really helps us to understand what the partners are working on. And same with industry. So we are definitely having earlier engagement with industry and developer partners on what they are thinking of doing, and being more open about what we would need from them, rather than kind of that give and take of here's the plan, here's the proposal, we'll just comment on it. So I've seen a lot of change actually in the last 12 months.
Yeah. I should have said up front that we are accepting questions from the floor. There's Slido that we're using, a platform. There's a QR code on everyone's table. Scan that, and I can see a few questions have already started to roll in. So I'll try to get to as many as I can during the session. But just picking up on a couple of those points, Trudi, you talked about that story around, and obviously there's some plans that are still being held up, obviously tying into that Greater Sydney Region plan that Chris mentioned. Monica, do you want to talk us through the process around it? I think the Minister was pretty direct in terms of expectations around what it will deliver, and a little bit different to previous iterations. But how important is that from a strategic standpoint in terms of being able to tie all of those pieces, from housing, infrastructure, employment, transport altogether?
Yeah, I mean, it's critically important, and I'm going to say that as a strategic planner, to have a strategic plan that guides us around the field, so to speak. But while we're working on that and producing the plan, we're doing all the planning work. So the noun is coming, the verb is happening. And so what I mean there is we've been talking about the land release, the zoning decisions, stepping in on where we need to with some state zoning decisions. And today we've talked about another state rezoning that will take place in Campbelltown here in Glenfield West. There's also work happening with the Industrial Land Action Plan that we're out talking about the amount of industrial land that we'll need and talking through the supply of industrial land, something that had been missing from the conversation for a little while. The work that's happened with low and mid-rise housing and making those interventions into the planning controls where there'd been quite a lot of missing decisions there and missing gaps in local plans. They're things that we are doing. Councils are also doing work all the time in response to that. So their own local planning work, updating contribution plans, responding to the housing and productivity contribution work, the works in kind policy. All of these things are the planning verbs that we are doing while we are getting the planning noun pulled together.
Yeah. The other point you made, Trudi, around industry engagement and hearing some really positive feedback around that. Maybe a question to all of you, and Syed, I'll start with you, given I think the elevation of Tom's role as the Coordinator General, which was quite sort of prolific last year. What are you hearing from industry, or what have you heard over the past 12 months? And what are the common messages that you hear back from industry in terms of the pace and speed with which things are done?
Yeah, I think when Tom got the role as Coordinator General, it was very exciting. I thought we'll get some black SUVs and go and smash people down and everything else. It wasn't to be. It wasn't like that. It was a lot simpler than that.
You fit the mold there, so I didn't want to say it. But
I even shaved my head accordingly, but it didn't really work out that way. But I think we've always worked with industry at Infrastructure New South Wales, but predominantly it's been with the construction industry. So we have a role. I think there was a discussion before about the construction costs and these things, and this is the stuff what we got used to hearing. With the role Tom got, we got a lot more of the landowner, developer, industry, and so on to come and talk to us. Obviously, they went and knocked on the doors of government, and the Premier, the Minister, the Treasurer, and everybody else got probably a lot of visits. And I think what we saw, our core job is to work with our agency partners to kind of obviously hear them out and see what is the best way to support the developments that they've committed quite large investments for in many cases, and we're expecting to see for some time infrastructure to kind of support the planning decisions and so on. And that's really been the biggest change is the amount we've spent away from our traditional kind of contractor construction market, which we still engage with significantly towards more the developer, even super funds, investors that have made investments in whether it's the Aerotropolis or Southwest Sydney, MacArthur and others. So we're spending a lot of time there, and our plans really are there to give them and the community and local government and others some certainty around what government is going to spend and invest in and when, and show that commitment and help then our agency partners with the central government end of how to effectively speed up the delivery, because that's another thing that government is really keen on, as I understand it, is to get projects up earlier, not to spend too long in documentation, but in actually physically building stuff, and how we get that happening quickly and efficiently is a core part of what we're doing now.
Thanks, Syed. Angela, metro is a word we hear a lot. We've been hearing a lot of, and especially around these parts, with good reason. Talk us through some of the things that you've seen through either the Northwest or City Southwest that have emerged over the past couple of years, the lessons that have taken from those projects that are being applied to the current line, and what may sit beyond that.
Yeah, it's really great to hear Metro discussed a lot. Obviously, it's a great passion of mine to deliver a world-class Metro to people of Sydney and in particular Western Sydney. We have learnt a lot in delivering the City and South West Line, and many of the things actually are about continuing best practice. So I get asked a lot about interoperability, and that becomes a bit of a contentious discussion point about whether the Metro should be interoperable or not. But we're consistently getting reliability over 99%, and the customer satisfaction on our Metro lines is month on month exceptional. So we continue then to make sure that we do have individual lines such that if there is an impact on one of our Metro lines, it doesn't take down the whole system. And that becomes really important when you think about the airport. So someone earlier spoke about Western Sydney being car reliant. To have a mode shift for people accessing the airport in the future, they will want to make sure that they can get to the airport, get to where they're going on time, and continuing to make sure that it is a world-class Metro service that is reliable, that people can depend on, and then they take a positive step to shift to public transport. I think that's one of the things that, Adam, we want to continue to keep doing and building upon.
Yeah, just on that point, and maybe one for you and for Trudi. Obviously, it's been well documented that the airport line won't be ready in time for the opening of the airport. What are some of the short-term or interim measures that you guys are looking at in terms of bus servicing, roads? What does that connection look like in that period until that line opens?
Yeah, we absolutely are working together, Trudi and I and our teams, to make sure that the best connection that we can have for when the airport goes into operation. We've obviously, Adam, had a target to open in line with the airport, and that's still, we're definitely trying to get the project finished and operational as soon as we possibly can. Today on site, I just checked in the morning, we have 3,500 people working to deliver the Metro today. We're in peak construction, and the good news is 50% or over 50% of those people are from Greater Western Sydney. So that's what I get up and do with my team and with our industry partners every day to try and get the project delivered as soon as we possibly can. And then obviously working with Trudi on ways to make sure in the interim, once the airport is operationalised, how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, probably there's no decision made on any bus or other services for Metro at the moment, but we are exploring all of the options. We will definitely have and are ready for the services from Liverpool, Campbelltown and Penrith that will go, the new bus services, into the airport, working with the airport on best timing for that, when we can get best accessibility. We've got the depots going in, we've got a new transport management centre that will be an incident response area for road access through transport into our TMC that we were funded for this year, along with all of the wayfinding, which might not sound important, but those signs are very important. So we have got all of that kind of activation funding through this year's budget, which will be great. So we will be ready to have connecting services, acknowledging Chris's point that they are not the rapid buses that everyone may have hoped for, but we're definitely providing choices for communities that would have no other public transport access for when the airport opens.
Got some good questions coming through, which I'll get to in a second, but just one final one for you, Monica. You pick up the front page of the Herald yesterday. You see the message, which I'm sure you've heard, and it's not unfamiliar. Developers walking away from infill areas in Western Sydney. Acknowledging Christopher's comments around market, involvement in trying to sort of influence cost of construction. But that aside, is there anything that the department's working on or looking at in terms of incentivising greenfield development to make it easier for large-scale projects in greenfield areas in the southwest?
Yeah, yesterday's story was very interesting, very timely with our budget estimates yesterday too. Still more than half of the homes that are coming through the pipeline are coming through in greenfield housing. And sometimes that term is used and misused. I think the nature of greenfield housing, being the conversion of farmland into suburbs, it is only one type of housing that's happening in Western Sydney and Southwest Sydney. Think about what's happening here in Campbelltown CBD and what the potential is for different types of housing here in Campbelltown CBD. I know that Landcom are looking at a site at MacArthur Gardens, and we'll see some apartment builds in that housing. But there will still be single detached homes in large parts of the southwest Sydney. We are talking with industry groups, the HIA, the UDIA, and with each of the councils about what is that housing diversity. So what is the choice that people want to have for terrace housing? What's the choice that people want to have for smaller lot housing? What is the choice that people want to have for more than one home on their site to be able to accommodate their multi-generational family, to accommodate their kids while they're studying or want to live by their family. So that concept that it is all single detached homes in streets and suburbs that are just growing out into farms all the time is not a true reflection of what is happening on the ground and what can happen on the ground. So part of what we're very keen to hear are those new ideas, those examples, the particular locations where that can happen, how we can work with councils and the developers to look at the planning controls that support that, the infrastructure that supports that, and to get great communities built that so many people want to live in here in southwest Sydney. Not everyone wants to live in eastern Sydney. There are so many people that their lives are here, their jobs are here, their communities are here. They want to stay here and grow their family, grow their business, grow their life here. We need to make sure we are planning for that.
Well said. Got a question here from Jay, just Jay with one letter. Not Jay Rowell, I can see in front of me. Regarding water infrastructure, sewer, potable water and stormwater are already a bottleneck in growth centres. How will the multi-billion-dollar shortfall between Sydney Water's forecast budget to growth against IPART's recommendations, and noting that the final recommendations are yet to be released, be covered without further increasing developer contributions? Anyone want to have a crack at that one? Yeah, I was looking there too, but he was a bit scary.
I was looking at a large number of Sydney Water staff who might be able to answer it better. But I guess maybe I just make some, because we made comments in the media about the program. Obviously, the IPART determination hasn't been finalized yet. But in some way, it is really working like everyone else at the moment. So most agencies would be working in a very, very constrained capital environment at the moment, which is quite challenging. And they'd have to prioritize within that and sequence their investments accordingly. And actually, maybe to add, it is not just about, I'm going to speak in behalf of transport and other agencies, but they're not only having investment programs to support growth or growing areas, but as we expand our asset base and we've been expanding, they're having to maintain service and existing communities. So when you're operating like that in a constrained capital environment, it's very challenging, and Sydney Water will probably be facing similar challenges whenever that determination comes, which is still servicing existing communities. We're trying to find the most efficient ways to service the growth, especially in greenfield areas where the investments are more significant. So it's not going to be an easy or simple job, but I won't speak on their behalf either, but I know they're working pretty hard to find ways to provide these services. So I don't know if you've got a panel with Sydney Water or a speaker later.
We will be hearing from them a little bit
You can
later.
Grill them to death. Maybe you can invite IPART as well along and see what
They didn't accept our invitation. No, I don't know why. Thanks, Sayed. Quick one here from Luke. Electrification of rail services south of MacArthur. Yay or nay? Why not?
Yes, would love to do that along with the long list of everything else. We have done feasibility work in the past. It's not part of the current South West Rail planning work, but don't worry, we know that everyone would love it, and it's definitely something we'd like to look at in the future.
Great. How do we make sure the metro from Western Sydney Airport to Campbelltown is the next metro that gets built and doesn't fall off the radar if and when Leppington Link is completed? Tricky one. Obviously, we're not talking funding here, but in terms of prioritisation, where do we see it?
So the government's asked City Metro and Transport for New South Wales to submit 2 business cases, one for the north and one for the south, so that they can be considered in complement. It doesn't often happen that way, and I think it's a really sensible approach. The benefits of both will be able to be considered one against the other, and then government will be able to make a decision once those business cases are submitted. But the way we deliver our metros makes sure that we consider how we expand in the future and how we can do that without impacting operations once we go into first passenger service, and how we can do it as economically as possible. So all of the future planning to allow for extension in the north and in the south has been contemplated, constructed, and we're ready to go. Good answer. The development industry is eagerly awaiting or eagerly anticipating the release of the UDP's IOP list. I recognise a key trigger for the opportunity to discuss works in kind arrangements in lieu of cash contributions. Outside of a VPA framework, how is government anticipating the delivery of critically enabling infrastructure?
Adam, that sounds like a question for me.
Yes, it does, but I'm still trying to figure out what the acronyms mean. IOP list, you might have to explain that, but sure. I suspect this is around the work in kinds and how that is going to work in terms of being able to manage funds from developers.
Well, we're great at acronyms in planning. So the UDP with an IOP that supports a WIK
okay. Yes.
It is a pretty good start to the acronym bingo card for today. So the IOP is an infrastructure opportunity plan. It's a new thing. We haven't had one in New South Wales before. We actually haven't seen very many examples of these in other jurisdictions. So we are starting from the concept of needing to have the list of infrastructure projects that the housing and productivity contribution can help support. It's to bring together what had been disparate ideas in previous lists that had come from separate strategic plans, separate infrastructure plans, separate works programs, all sorts of places, and to bring it into one list that we could then, as a collective, and that collective is state government, planners in all agencies, the decision makers about how money gets spent, so Treasury and our friends there, councils and their choices for community, and the development and land owners and their investment decisions too, so that we could prioritise where would be best for the infrastructure to be delivered. And prioritise is probably the word of the day from everybody here. There's choices to be made. So it's taking us a little longer than we had anticipated to bring this infrastructure opportunities plan together, because there are so many pieces that we needed to collect, to then validate, to do some quality checks to make sure that the information was as up to date, information stemming back several years on some infrastructure ideas. We also needed to build the framework around this. So the works in kind policy we haven't had for the housing and productivity contribution. We did have a works in kind policy for the previous state infrastructure contributions in different places. But we ran into a few problems. We've had some half-built roads where things haven't been completed. We've had cost overruns. We've had really large credit obligations created through the previous framework. So we needed to come out with a new works in kind guideline, and we've exhibited that. And we had submissions from all the councils that and all the major landowners that we anticipate will use. The Minister's already mentioned that that's a policy position that we would be working to have settled this year. So there's work underway. The urban development program and the committees that support that, which councils are represented on, infrastructure agencies and state agencies are represented on, development groups are represented on, are helping input into that, and we'll be anticipating updating them in the coming weeks about the timing of the plan.
Great. Thanks, Monica. Talking federally now, there's a question here regarding the Prime Minister's $1 billion announcement prior to the election earlier this year for corridor preservation for future metro links to Campbelltown. What's your relationship conversation been like at a federal level to understand how that's progressing? What's actually happening there? Is it covering through Trudi? Is it transport? Obviously there's some planning layers to that as well. What's the latest on that, and how are you guys working with the feds to see that through?
Thanks for that question. We work with federal government all the time. We have been really pleased to see their commitment and discussions around the Southwest in particular, and that significant investment. We have the advantage of working through the Southwest business cases at the moment, which are helping with those conversations. We've got no land on exactly what that looks like at this time, but the commitment there is a huge step forward.
And Adam, my contribution on this more broadly with the Commonwealth is that the work that we're doing on the Housing Accord is to get completions every day, every week, every month, every quarter, every year to 2029. The infrastructure investment we need is now, not at the end of the Accord period. So the funding that's scheduled to come at the end of the Accord when some of these numbers are reached is going to be too late for the infrastructure that we need in the ground for those houses to be completed every week, every month, every quarter as we work towards 2029. So that's just my plug for some earlier release of funding from the Commonwealth.
Great. On while you've got the mic, Monica, there's obviously on the theme of infrastructure and new things that are starting to emerge. Not particularly new things, but the one that's it's sort of become a little bit more prevalent in recent times, I think connects back to some of the land use decisions that you're going to be making in terms of industrial, residential, commercial. Data centres, 70%, I believe, or thereabouts, new data centres going to be based in Western Sydney. There's a lot coming. Did we see that as one of the strategic issues that planning was looking at 5-6 years ago? Is this a new thing that you guys are now starting to consider from a planning and an infrastructure standpoint, or was it always something that you had anticipated and it's business as usual?
Look, and Saeed might have some views on this as well, because I know Infrastructure New South Wales have been looking at the data centre growth. Look, in the land use planning space, we're always looking out and around to see what is changing, to make sure that we are anticipating and planning for those changes. So we made some amendments to our planning controls quite a few years ago to be able to make data centres state significant development, so that the assessment would happen by state agencies. And the reason for that is that they do consume a lot of water, they do consume a lot of power. There are some environmental impacts that we want to be able to take into account and to bring the state's agencies, environmental agencies, as well as planning agencies together for that. The location of data centres, I think there's interest happening in lots of places, and maybe the availability of sites at the moment and access to infrastructure and that is necessary is happening here in the West. The interest continues to pick up, which is a great thing, right? It's a really good indication that New South Wales is an excellent, safe, secure place for these high technology. It gives us better access to finance to occur. It's going to be great for a range of different industries to grow around data centres. So that's something to, I think that we're looking to embrace in New South Wales, and making sure that the land use planning framework is set up for that, and the infrastructure is matched with that too.
Zahid?
I think Monica covered most things, but the only thing I would say is obviously government wants to embrace technology, take the opportunities that come with growth in industries like data centers, which are supporting multiple other digital economy type things, and do it in a way that Sydney Water can still provide water for housing, wastewater services and other things to the rest of the community, the rest of industry and so on, and so the energy providers. And there are ways to do it. The data centers themselves and the providers also coming up with ideas. They know the challenges. It's been stuff they've seen in other countries. So we've seen countries switch on and switch off data centers. So it's kind of rapidly evolving. And what we see our job as is to work with the infrastructure providers to these data centers to enable the government to achieve its ambition around getting all of this investment, creating the jobs and the industries that come around it. So I think it's having, I guess, New South Wales open for these things and doing it in a responsible way. So the impacts that they create is managed in the best possible way. And I think that's really the best way to put it. And it's moving rapidly, so it's not something we can sit and plan for 10 years. It's something we're trying to grapple with every day now, I think.
Is there a new data centre that we don't know about, like in terms of a concept or a theme that is 10 years away now that you guys are thinking that this is going to be an issue, in 15 years?
I think you probably only need to look at some other countries and see the scale of the data centers that I've looked recently, just probably last week, at I think a data center that's being developed in the north of England in the UK, and I think it's the size of a city almost. So they're another country that's taken the position to support those industries for their own investment purposes. So they are really, really large, and they obviously consume a lot of water and energy. That doesn't say we don't support them, is we work with them to find the best possible way, sometimes find solutions. So again, probably Sydney Water looking at things like the use of wastewater that we discharge into the ocean going into a data center. So it's not all bad, and it's just trying to find a way to still provide for them, get the opportunity or the economic development that is created by them, if there are export opportunities and other opportunities, and just making sure that we're enabling them. And yes, Western Sydney is an area where they're looking at, or Aerotropolis, definitely some of the developers are looking there, and it's for good reason, because probably the land availability, it's industrial sites. So I think it's just something happening around us, and we can't bury our head in the sand, and we're just trying to find ways to enable them in a responsible way.
Monica, Trudi, Angela, are there things on the horizon that you're planning for now that we don't know about, or the punters don't know about?
Can't let all the secrets. Hold on.
The
Trudi
minister's
talked
still
about
here,
being
so
transparent.
Come and
careful
see
with
us at
what you say.
lunchtime.
Yeah, that's right.
Fair enough. No,
In the
keep it
meantime,
quiet. No,
Metro.
okay.
No secret.
Nothing to see here. Question here, and I know there's been a lot of ideas, a lot of innovation happening in that planning space around unlocking housing. Question here, how can we unlock unused lots of existing houses in LGAs that are just sitting idle for investors and industry to tap into build childcare, aged care, NDIS, DV shelters to support new migrants, etc. What are some options being considered now about sort of making use of those unused facilities?
Yeah, so there's been quite a few things that have been happening. So we've had really narrow definitions on places that can be used for emergency accommodation, so crisis accommodation. So we're making sure that we are being more contemporary about that. So if a place had been used only for aged housing, but now wants to be able to be used for crisis accommodation, that we can make the planning rules more simple to be able to convert between those things. That's really sensible, really straightforward changes that we can make. We also, and the Minister mentioned the pattern book, and just making those examples of different types of housing, terrace housing, manor home housing, small apartment builds, just easier for people to be able to take the idea and go and build it on their block of land. The removing the need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in your bespoke plan with an architect and getting that designed up and getting that ready to be able to move that into, at the moment, a $1 purchase of a pattern, and to have a very fast approval process. It is an amazing change to how we've contemplated different types of housing delivery. So I think that's a relatively new thing. The pattern book, been stacks of interest across all parts of New South Wales, other states, even internationally. People are looking at the ideas in the pattern book and purchasing the patterns. We're very excited to see the first of those being built and some demonstration projects with our partners in Landcom on some sites that they have around Sydney.
Great. I started the session by reflecting on the last 12 months and the work that's happened there, and you pointed to some really positive news there, Trudi. What does, and for all of you, and quickly wrapping up because we're running out of time, but what does the next 12 months look like in terms of some of the big things that we should be looking forward to? Trudi, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I wouldn't mind just saying I came into this role 4 years ago. There was not a very small amount of planning work being done for the Southwest. So I am excited for next year to see hopefully the fruition of some funding, because Monica is right, we need it now. We've done some good planning work. We have got Southwest planning money. I hear the call for Spring Farm Parkway 2. We're looking at Menangle Road, Picton Bypass, Cow Pasture, 15th, we'll be starting on. Like, there's delivery money starting, but I want to see more of that for roads and more services as well. Rail takes a bit longer, but we have seen some bus services from Wilton to Campbelltown. So for me, the next 12 months, 2 years is all about more services and starting delivery on some of those plans.
Great. Monica?
Cranes in the sky and more housing completions than we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. I think that is coming to us in the next 12 months.
We've seen an industry who can build metros so efficiently and effectively, and if we don't see business cases get considered and then funded in the future, and ideally in the next 12 months, we are at risk of losing a highly skilled workforce to other jurisdictions where metros are being built. So I think the next 12 months, investment in future business, in future metro and rail and other projects to make sure that we can keep our skilled workforce locally.
Zahid.
I know it's a transport and planning panel, but I think maybe for this area, driving down from the other side, it's a car parking lot driving the other way, so it's not a great outcome. I think Chris was talking about the outcomes for the community here. So probably over the 12 months, if we start thinking about not just houses being built and some roads or rail, but the broader social amenity, the social infrastructure, and other things that are needed in the region to make lives better for people. So it's not we're just building a lot of isolated communities that just may be linked by a road and that's it, but just something to think about the impact of the community, the links to, and not just because the minister is there, but the links to Wollongong and that spread of jobs a bit. Just thinking about the jobs and where people will go and work will be, I think, really interesting for us to be thinking about over the next 12 months, not just some water infrastructure and some roads, I think.
Thanks, Sayed, and thank you. I mean, that's obviously paints a pretty positive picture about what the next 12 months looks like, and I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities there. So thank you. I know it's budget estimates time as well, so you're super busy, but you made time to be here today. So ladies and gentlemen, please thank our super panel.